Caleb drove through the winding back roads of rural America, the moon casting a pale glow over the endless sea of cornfields. His headlights cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but rows of towering cornstalks swaying in the gentle breeze. The radio sputtered static, and his cell phone lay dead on the passenger seat. He cursed under his breath, realizing he was miles from civilization with no way to call for help. Suddenly, the engine coughed and sputtered, and the car jerked violently before coasting to a silent halt. Caleb tried turning the key in the ignition, but it only elicited a series of hopeless clicks. He slammed his fist on the steering wheel, his frustration boiling over. Great. Just great, he muttered to himself, glancing around at the desolate landscape. The silence was deafening, broken only by the whispering rustle of the corn. He stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching under his boots, and popped the hood, peering into the dark abyss of the engine bay. After a few futile minutes of tinkering, Caleb realized he was out of his depth. The night seemed to close in around him, the darkness pressing against his back. He straightened up, wiping his hands on his jeans, and squinted into the cornfield. Was that a light? A faint flicker of hope danced in the distance, deep within the maze of cornstalks. With no other options, Caleb decided to investigate. He grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment and set off, the beam cutting through the night. The cornfield loomed ahead, each stalk standing like a silent sentinel. As he ventured deeper, the air grew colder, and the unsettling sensation of being watched prickled at the back of his neck. The cornfield seemed endless, the rows blurring together in a dizzying pattern. The light grew brighter but remained elusive, always just out of reach. Caleb stumbled over uneven ground, his heart pounding louder with each step. Odd signs of disturbance began to appear. Broken cornstalks, animal carcasses in various stages of decay, and scarecrows standing at irregular intervals. The scarecrows were unnerving, their ragged clothes fluttering in the breeze. Some had twisted faces made from burlap sacks, while others wore grotesque masks that seemed to leer at him. Caleb shuddered, trying to shake off the growing sense of dread. He pressed on, his footsteps echoing in the unnatural quiet. Finally, he emerged into a clearing. An old, dilapidated farmhouse stood at the center, its windows dark and lifeless, except for a single flickering light inside. The building seemed to sag under the weight of years of neglect, its paint peeling and shutters hanging askew. As he approached, Caleb noticed a scarecrow hanging nearby, its eyes seeming to follow his every move. The scarecrow was different from the others. It was more sinister, with a tattered hat pulled low over its face and long, bony fingers clutching a wooden cross. Its eyes, dark pits in the moonlight, seemed to bore into Caleb's soul. He swallowed hard, trying to ignore the feeling of unease creeping up his spine. Just get to the house. Maybe there's a phone or someone who can help, he thought, pushing open the creaking gate. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the ground squelched underfoot as he made his way to the porch. The scarecrow's presence lingered in his mind, a dark shadow over his thoughts. He reached the front door and hesitated, glancing back at the scarecrow one last time. It seemed to grin at him, a malevolent smile carved into its burlap face. Caleb shook his head, trying to dispel the irrational fear, and turned the doorknob. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit interior. The light inside flickered, casting eerie shadows across the room. As Caleb stepped inside, the sense of foreboding grew stronger. The farmhouse felt like a place out of time, trapped in a perpetual state of decay. Dust-covered furniture and cobwebs draped every surface, remnants of a family long gone. Caleb took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever lay ahead. He had no choice but to venture further into the house, hoping to find some means of communication or at least shelter from the oppressive night. Behind him, the scarecrow stood silent and watchful, its dark eyes never leaving him. Caleb entered the farmhouse cautiously, the heavy wooden door creaking shut behind him. The interior was bathed in a sickly, flickering light that seemed to dance with every draft. He called out, his voice echoing in the oppressive silence. "Hello? Is anyone here? I need help." Only silence answered him. Caleb's eyes adjusted to the dim light, revealing a scene frozen in time. Dusty furniture, yellowed photographs, and personal items lay scattered about as if the occupants had fled in haste. A chill ran down his spine as he stepped further into the room, his flashlight casting long shadows that seemed to twist and writhe on the walls. The house was filled with the detritus of a long-gone family. A child's doll lying abandoned in a corner, its glass eyes staring blankly. A wedding photo, the faces smiling blissfully from a time long past. An old calendar hanging lopsidedly, its pages yellowed and brittle. Caleb picked up the photo, brushing away the dust. The family looked happy, their smiles frozen in a moment of joy that seemed alien in the current, decayed setting. As he moved deeper into the house, Caleb couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The light grew dimmer, and the air colder. He entered what seemed to be a living room, the walls lined with dusty bookshelves and faded wallpaper peeling at the edges. The furniture was covered in sheets, giving the room a ghostly appearance. A sudden noise made Caleb freeze. It was a soft, shuffling sound coming from below. His heart pounded as he listened intently. The noise grew louder, more distinct, coming from the basement. Against his better judgment, Caleb felt compelled to investigate. He needed to find a working phone or some other way to call for help, and the basement seemed as likely a place as any to start. He found the basement door in the kitchen, its paint chipped and the handle cold to the touch. He opened it slowly, the hinges squealing in protest. A dank, musty smell wafted up from the darkness below, and Caleb gagged at the stench of decay. He flicked on his flashlight and descended the creaky wooden steps, each one groaning under his weight. The basement was a nightmarish tableau of rot and ruin. The walls were damp, and the floor was littered with debris. Caleb's flashlight beam revealed old clothes, personal effects, and what appeared to be dried bloodstains. His stomach churned as he realized he was standing in the remnants of past victims' lives. In the corner, he spotted an old journal, its leather cover cracked and worn. He picked it up, his hands trembling, and began to read. The journal belonged to the farmer who once lived here, and its pages were filled with chilling tales of a curse placed upon the Scarecrows to protect the land. The curse demanded human sacrifices in return, and the Scarecrows were the enforcers of this dark pact. As Caleb read, the air grew colder, and the sense of dread deepened. The journal detailed how the Scarecrows would come to life, driven by a malevolent force, to hunt down and kill anyone who trespassed on the cursed land. The entries became more frantic, the handwriting more erratic, as the farmer recounted his growing fear and the desperate measures he took to protect his family. Caleb's heart raced as he reached the final, blood-stained pages. The farmer described how the Scarecrows had become more aggressive, more relentless in their pursuit of victims. He wrote of hearing heavy footsteps in the night, of seeing the Scarecrows moving, their eyes glowing with a sinister light. A sudden, heavy thud from above snapped Caleb out of his horrified reverie. He froze, his breath catching in his throat. The footsteps grew louder, descending the stairs with a deliberate, menacing rhythm. Caleb turned, his flashlight beam shaking as he pointed it toward the staircase. Emerging from the shadows was the Scarecrow he had seen outside. It was now animated, its eyes glowing with a malevolent red light. The tattered clothes hung from its gaunt frame, and its bony fingers flexed with unnatural strength. Caleb backed away, his mind racing with terror. The Scarecrow's hollow eyes locked onto Caleb, and it let out a low, guttural growl. Caleb realized with horror that the Scarecrow was not merely a guardian, but a predator, hungry for flesh. His breath came in ragged gasps as he frantically looked for an escape route. The basement door was too far, and the Scarecrow was blocking the stairs. Caleb's mind raced, trying to recall any hints from the journal about the Scarecrow's weaknesses. His only chance was to evade the creature and find a way out of this nightmare. Caleb's heart thundered in his chest as he bolted for the basement stairs, his fingers grazing the splintered railing. The air was thick with decay and fear, and each step seemed to echo louder, mocking his desperation. Just as his foot hit the first step, a shadow loomed in the doorway, blocking his escape. The Scarecrow's empty eyes bore into him, its ragged form swaying unnaturally. "Not today," Caleb whispered to himself, determination battling terror. Caleb's mind raced, replaying the frantic scribbles in the journal he'd found. The old farmer's notes hinted at the Scarecrow's vulnerabilities. Salt, fire, isolation. His gaze darted around the basement, no salt in sight. The Scarecrow's head tilted, as if mocking his futile search. Caleb backed up slowly, eyes never leaving the sinister figure. He turned and sprinted through the basement, weaving between forgotten relics and discarded furniture. The Scarecrow's footsteps followed, slow and deliberate, a metronome of impending doom. Caleb burst through a side door into the kitchen, slamming it shut and shoving a heavy table against it. He had moments, if that. He grabbed a knife from the counter, hands trembling. The farmhouse was old, filled with hidden nooks and crannies. He moved quickly, navigating the darkened hallways and ducking into shadowed corners, his breath shallow and quick. Each creak of the floorboards, each whisper of the wind outside made his pulse race faster. He remembered the journal's mention of the Scarecrow's aversion to light, and with shaky hands, he lit an old oil lamp, casting long, flickering shadows around him. The house seemed to breathe with him, its wooden frame groaning under the weight of years and secrets. The Scarecrow's relentless pursuit drove Caleb into the cornfield, the tall stalks closing around him like skeletal fingers. The moon cast an eerie glow over the field, turning each rustle of the corn into a sinister whisper. Caleb ducked and weaved through the rows, using the natural cover to his advantage. He could hear the Scarecrow's movements, a slow and purposeful rustling that contrasted with his frantic escape. The cornfield was a maze of despair. Caleb's thoughts raced back to the journal's hints. Fire, the one element that might save him. His eyes scanned the field for anything he could use. A rusted gasoline can, half buried near an old tractor, caught his eye. He stumbled toward it, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The Scarecrow was closing in, its presence an oppressive force behind him. With trembling hands, Caleb doused the surrounding corn with gasoline, the pungent smell burning his nostrils. He pulled out a matchbook, his last desperate hope. Striking the match, he hesitated for a fraction of a second, a sliver of doubt piercing his resolve. Then he threw it, the tiny flame igniting a voracious blaze that quickly spread through the dry stalks. The fire roared to life, consuming the cornfield with a fury that mirrored Caleb's desperation. The flames danced and crackled, casting monstrous shadows and creating a chaotic, hellish landscape. Caleb backed away, his eyes fixed on the inferno. The Scarecrow emerged from the flames, its silhouette a dark, menacing figure against the fiery backdrop. In a final act of defiance, Caleb stood his ground. The fire illuminated his determined face, sweat and soot mingling on his skin. He brandished the knife, ready to fight until his last breath. The Scarecrow moved with unnatural grace, closing the distance between them. Caleb lunged, but the Scarecrow's supernatural strength was overwhelming. It swatted the knife away with ease, lifting Caleb off his feet. The Scarecrow's grip tightened around Caleb, its straw-filled hands digging into his flesh. Caleb gasped, feeling an intense cold radiate from the Scarecrow's touch. His body went rigid as he felt the life being drained from him. His energy siphoned away like water from a cracked vessel. The Scarecrow's hollow eyes seemed to glow with a malevolent hunger as it consumed him, absorbing his essence into its own twisted form. Caleb's vision darkened, his consciousness slipping away as he felt his very soul being devoured. The Scarecrow's head tilted back in a silent scream of triumph, its form growing more solid, more powerful with each passing second. Caleb's final thoughts were of the journal's warnings and the futility of his struggle against the ancient, relentless evil. As the fire raged around them, Caleb's body crumpled, lifeless and empty. The Scarecrow, now sated and revitalized, returned to its post, standing sentinel over the scorched remnants of the cornfield. The farmhouse light flickered off, blending into the night as if nothing had ever happened. The silence of the field was absolute, broken only by the distant crackle of dying flames. The land lay in wait, patient and indifferent, ready for the next soul to wander into its grasp.